The war was finally over, but instead of a medal, the human soldier was brought to his enemy's throne in chains. The great hall of the alien palace was cold and bright, built from black stone that drank in the light. Human banners and alien banners hung side by side, but there was no warmth in the air, only tension. Soldiers from both sides stood in silent lines, watching the man in chains walk toward the high steps. His name was Jace. He had survived the worst battles of the war. He had watched cities burn, ships fall from the sky, and friends die with his name on their lips. Now he stood in front of the alien warlord he had sworn to kill. But today, no weapons were drawn. Today they spoke of peace. The alien warlord sat on a wide throne made of dark metal, his 4 eyes calm and cold. His horns were decorated with gold rings, a sign of victories. To Jace, those rings looked like trophies taken from the dead. "Human," the warlord said, his voice echoing in the high ceiling, "you fought my armies. You destroyed my ships. You killed my sons in battle. Many call you a hero. I call you an enemy." Jace lifted his chin. "If you called me a friend, I would worry," he answered. A few human officers behind him tried not to react. This was a peace hall, not a battlefield. The alien crowd hissed and muttered, but the warlord simply watched him. "You stand here today because your leaders and I agreed to end this war." The warlord continued, "Your fate, human, is now part of that peace." Jace gritted his teeth. He was ready to face prison, exile, maybe even execution. He had accepted that months ago. But then the warlord smiled, and something in that smile made Jace's blood run cold. "I will not kill you," the alien said. "I will give you a gift." The word sounded wrong in his mouth. The warlord rose from his throne and gestured. The crowd parted. From a side doorway, a figure stepped into the hall. She moved slowly, her head bowed, her shoulders hunched like she had learned to make herself small, even though her body was large. This was his daughter. She was bigger then. Most of her people, soft where others were sharp, dressed in heavy cloth that tried and failed to hide her size. Her 4 eyes stayed on the floor. Jace heard the whispers around him. Unwanted, too big. No suitor kept the bond. She's only useful for deals. Every word was like a stone thrown at her back, but she did not flinch. It was clear this was not new. She had heard these words all her life. "This," the warlord said, his voice hard now, "is Mira, my daughter. You killed my sons, human. You ruined my plans. So here is your punishment and your peace." He turned so the whole hall could see both of them. "You will marry her." The hall exploded in noise. Some aliens laughed, some shouted in shock. Human officers looked at each other, confused and angry. Jace felt his heart slam against his ribs. Marry her? He stared up at the warlord, thinking he had misheard. "You want to make me your son?" he asked in disbelief. The warlord's smile was sharp. "No, I want to bind you to the daughter no one wanted. A living reminder that you serve the treaty now. You will be my enemy and my tool, all in one." His eyes narrowed. "Refuse, and the peace talks end today. The war starts again. More of your people die." Behind Jace, the human ambassador stepped forward quickly. "Captain Jace," he whispered, panic in his eyes, "if you refuse, we lose everything we signed for. Our colonies, our prisoners, our wounded." Jace looked from the ambassador to the warlord, then to the girl standing silently in the middle of the hall. Mira still did not look up. She stood like a stone in a storm, waiting to be hit. He hated the warlord. He hated being used. He hated that his choice could restart the nightmare for his people. Slowly, Jace's hands clenched into fists around the cold metal of his chains. "Do I have any real choice?" he asked. The warlord spread his hands. "You have the choice between duty and destruction. The same choice I have. Choose. The hall went quiet again. Everyone waited. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Jace swallowed. His voice felt dry when he spoke. "If my yes keeps my people safe," he said, "then I agree." A wave of whispers rushed through the hall. Mira's shoulders twitched, just a little, as if she had been struck by invisible lightning. She dared to lift her eyes for a second, just long enough for Jace to see them. They were not cruel eyes. They were tired, afraid, and full of a deep, quiet pain. The warlord snapped his fingers. The chains around Jace's wrists unlocked and fell to the floor with a heavy sound. Two alien priests stepped forward, carrying a glowing metal band. It was wide and dark, etched with alien symbols. A marriage band. Once sealed, it could not be removed without both partners' consent or a court's order. "Come," the warlord ordered. Jace walked to the center of the hall. Mira stood there, hands folded, eyes lowered again. When he stopped in front of her, he realized his heart was pounding harder now than on any battlefield. This was not the enemy he had trained to fight. This was something else. The priest raised the band. "Place your hands together," he said. Mira hesitated, expecting him to pull away, to hesitate, to show disgust. That was what everyone else had done. But Jace did something small and strange. He took her hand first. Her skin was warmer than he expected. She flinched, then glanced up at him, surprised. For a moment, their eyes met. "I am Jace," he said quietly so only she could hear. "Not human, not punishment, just Jace." Her lips parted slightly. It was the first kind word she had heard on a wedding platform. The priest slid the band over their joined wrists. Light flared, hot and bright, sealing the bond. A heavy weight settled around Jace's arm, a physical reminder that his life had just changed forever. "By law and contract," the priest announced to the hall, "they are now bound." The crowd reacted again, some with anger, some with laughter, some with uneasy silence. The warlord watched, expression unreadable. Jace felt the band pulse once around his wrist, as if it had a heartbeat. Mira's hand trembled in his, but she did not pull away. He had walked into this hall as a prisoner of war. He walked out married to the daughter of his greatest enemy. And somewhere, deep inside, a quiet thought whispered, dangerous and unwanted. This might not be the punishment he thinks it is. Asterisk, he expected a monster, but found a woman who could not even look at her. On reflection, the journey from the throne hall to the private carriage felt long and strange. Jace walked beside Mira, still bound to her by the glowing marriage band around their wrists. The corridor was quiet, but whispers followed them like shadows. Alien servants pressed themselves against the walls, bowing to Mira only because they were forced to, but their eyes were full of mockery, not respect. Mira kept her head down the entire time, moving softly despite her large frame. She looked like someone who had learned long ago to make herself invisible, even when she took up space. Jace noticed that she never walked in the center of the hallway. She stayed close to the wall, like she did not believe she had the right to exist in open air. When they stepped inside the carriage, the door closed behind them, leaving only silence. The cushions were soft, the lights dim, and the air smelled like alien flowers. But the atmosphere was heavy, awkward, full of things neither knew how to say. Jace sat across from her, studying her carefully. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her 4 eyes stayed fixed on the floor. She seemed afraid to breathe too loudly. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Jace said gently. Mira flinched, as if the words themselves hurt. "I am not afraid," she whispered. But her trembling fingers said otherwise. Jace spoke softly. "This marriage, I didn't choose it. I know you didn't either." Mira slowly nodded. "No one ever chooses me," she said, her voice barely audible, not bitter, just tired. "I am a bargain piece. A trade. A reminder that even a daughter can be a tool." Jace felt a strange ache in his chest. He had expected pride, arrogance, cruelty, traits of the warlord who raised her. But Mira had none of them. She looked like someone who had lived a life full of silence and humiliation. The carriage stopped at the Grand Palace quarters, where they were expected to spend their first night as a married couple. Guards saluted Jace, not out of respect for him, but because the treaty required it. Their eyes, however, slid toward Mira with disgust. One guard smirked and muttered, "Poor human." Imagine waking up to that. Mira froze. Her shoulders curled inward. She waited for Jace to step away, to deny her, to show shame like every other suitor had done before. But he didn't. He turned to the guard, his voice sharp. "Show respect. She is your princess." The guard blinked in surprise, taken aback. Mira stared at Jace, confused. No one had ever corrected an insult for her before, not even her father. Inside the private chamber, the door closed behind them, leaving only soft lantern light and a heavy silence. The room was large, with 2 beds, high windows, and a silver mirror on the far wall. Mira walked past the mirror without looking at it, as if she had learned to avoid it. Jace placed his travel bag down and noticed her trembling hands. "You can sit," he said softly. "I won't force anything. Not words, not closeness, not expectations." Mira's eyes widened slightly. "You will not mock me? Why would I?" She swallowed. "Everyone does. My size, my face, my voice, my failure." She tugged at her heavy clothing, trying to hide her shape. "My father offered me to generals, commanders, nobles. All refused. Some laughed while refusing." Jace sat down slowly. Then they were fools. Mira's 4 eyes blinked, unsure whether to believe him. No one had ever defended her worth before, not even as a lie. A soft knock interrupted them. Servants entered with food trays, but their expressions were cruel. They placed 2 plates in front of Jace: fresh meat, warm bread, rich sauce, and 1 small plain bowl in front of Mira, a thin soup. Barely food at all. One servant snickered. Her diet, by royal order. Too much appetite, too much shame. Jace looked at Mira, her cheeks burned. She stared at the table, humiliated but silent. Used to this treatment, Jace pushed one of his plates toward her. Mira froze. "No, they will report you. You will be punished." "Let them," Jace said. "You are my wife now. You eat like a person." Her throat tightened. She hesitated, then slowly reached for the plate. It was a small movement, but brave. The servants left, confused and unsettled. Mira ate quietly, carefully, like she feared someone would rip the plate away. Jace pretended not to notice, giving her dignity. When they finished, night settled around them. Mira stood near the window, hands clasped. "You are different from the others," she said softly. Jace looked at her. "Maybe we both are." For the first time, Mira lifted her eyes fully to his. There was fear there, but also something new. Something fragile. Hope. The marriage had begun as a punishment, but something had shifted tonight. Something neither of them had expected, and outside the palace walls, unseen eyes were already watching, angry, jealous, and waiting to see this union fail. They were sent to live as husband and wife, but every wall had eyes, and every smile hid a knife. The alien palace wasted no time. Less than 24 hours after the wedding, Jace and Mira were escorted to a border region estate known as the Peace Quarters. Officially, it was a generous gift from the Alien High Council, a symbol of harmony between human and alien blood. Unofficially, it was a golden cage wrapped in silk. The estate was beautiful from the outside. White stone towers, glowing blue windows, and manicured alien gardens surrounded the structure. Birds with shimmering wings circled the sky, and a silver river passed behind the hill. But Jace knew better. It was too perfect, too staged. The place was crawling with quiet servants and silent guards. Mira told him in a whisper that some of the gardeners weren't gardeners at all, but trained watchers loyal to her father. Even the walls felt like they listened. As soon as the door closed behind them, Jace walked through each room carefully. He tapped the corners, looked behind vases, inside vents, even under the furniture. Hidden microphones, tiny glass lenses. He found at least 7 cameras by nightfall. Myra stood in the hallway, quietly watching him. She didn't ask what he was doing. She already knew. This house is a theater, Jace muttered. And we're the play, she nodded slowly. They want to see if we fight, if we fail, if I shame them, if you insult me. And if I touch you like a husband, he added grimly. Myra looked down. Her fingers played with the edge of her robe. They want humiliation, not healing. For the first week, their life followed a script. They woke at the same time, shared meals in the open dining hall, and took formal walks through the garden, always watched. Jace noticed how cold the servants were to Mira, how they barely looked her in the eyes, how they placed the good food in front of him and the scraps in front of her, as if reminding her she was still a burden. He hated it. But what he hated more was Myra's silence. She never complained. She simply accepted it, like she had been trained to believe kindness was a mistake. One evening, while walking along the inner balcony, Jace saw her standing by the glass railing. Her 4 eyes were focused on the stars, but her face was expressionless. Still, tired, he approached her slowly. Do you like it here? He asked gently. Myra shook her head. This is not home, she whispered. Jac leaned on the railing beside her. What was home for you? She paused for a long time. There was a cliff near the mountains. As a child, I used to sit there alone. No one came, no servants, no voices, just wind and quiet. Sounds peaceful. It was the only place I wasn't being judged, she said softly. Jace watched her profile in the dim light. The strength in her jaw, the quiet sadness in her eyes. She wasn't weak. She had just been pushed down for too long. That night, when they returned to their room, something felt different. Mira didn't hide in the far corner. She sat near the window instead, wrapping herself in a blanket and sipping warm root tea. Jace turned off the lamps, one by one, until only moonlight filled the room. Why do you treat me kindly? She asked suddenly. Jace looked at her, surprised. Because I see you, he said. Not your weight, not your bloodline, not your father's war, just you. She blinked. No one has ever said that. Then everyone else was blind. For the first time since their forced union, Mira smiled. A small, unsure smile, but it was real. The moment didn't last. The next morning, an explosion rocked the northern wing of the estate. Guards rushed in. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the halls. Jace pulled Mira down, shielding her with his body as they ducked behind the stairwell. Screams echoed. Security bots rolled past. Someone yelled that it was sabotage. Who would attack the peace quarters? Mira gasped. Someone who wants this marriage to fail. Jace growled. They didn't know it yet, but the eyes watching them had seen enough. And someone somewhere had just ordered their union to end in fire. Asterisk smoke still hung in the air. But something had changed in the fire. She saw him bleed for her. And ash floated like dead snow through the hallway. The explosion had torn a chunk of the estate's northern wing to rubble. Walls cracked, windows shattered. Dozens of servants were wounded. But no one was killed because Jace had pulled Mira into a shielded stairwell just in time. Now 2 hours later, the air was still thick with smoke and fear. Jace sat on the floor of their bedroom, his arm wrapped in cloth. Blood soaked through. Mira knelt in front of him, her 4 eyes wide, hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. Hold still, she whispered. I am still, he said through gritted teeth. "No, you're not," she replied gently, tying the bandage with shaking fingers. "You're pretending not to hurt." Jace gave a dry smile. "Isn't that what soldiers do?" Mira lowered her head, focusing on his injury. Her hands were soft but unsure. It was clear she wasn't trained in medicine, but she moved with surprising care. "Why did you pull me down like that?" she asked softly. "You could have escaped alone." Jace stared at her. "Because you're my wife." She looked up at him confused. "But you didn't choose me." "I didn't choose the war either," he said. "But I chose to protect my people. And now, I choose to protect you." Silence settled between them like a fragile bridge. Then Mira did something unexpected. She rolled back the sleeve of her robe and extended her arm. It was covered in old scars. Thin lines, deep bruises. Marks not from accident, but from cruelty. Jace's expression tightened. "Who did that?" She didn't answer right away. Her voice was low when she finally spoke. "Every time a suitor rejected me, Father said it was my fault, that I wasn't graceful enough. Not slim enough, not quiet enough. I trained in silence, I ate alone. I learned to speak only when asked, and still, no one stayed." Her fingers curled around her arm, hiding the scars again. "I became the daughter no one wanted. So he gave me away, to you." Jace's voice was steady, but heavy. "He didn't give you away, he threw you out. Like a piece of armor he didn't want. But he made a mistake." Mira's voice cracked. "Why?" "Because I don't throw people away." She blinked fast, holding back the tears she wasn't used to letting fall. "You weren't what I expected either." Jace continued. "I thought I'd hate you. I thought you'd be like him. But you're gentle, smarter than you let on, stronger than anyone sees." She looked at him like he was speaking a language she didn't know. Jace leaned back, wincing from the pain. "They want this marriage to fail. I can see it." "That explosion wasn't random." Mira nodded. "You were supposed to die. Or I was. Either way, the treaty would break." Jace looked at her. "You want this marriage to fail?" Her lips parted. But no words came out. He waited. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "But I know I don't want to go back to being alone." Jace slowly reached out and took her hand. Her fingers twitched, then curled around his. "I'll stay," he said. "As long as you want me to." Myra's throat tightened. She nodded once. It wasn't a dramatic promise, just a quiet agreement. That night, for the first time, they sat together on the same side of the room. No walls between them. No guards watching. Just two scarred souls who had nothing left to lose but maybe something new to build. Outside, soldiers moved to rebuild the damaged estate. Inside, no one knew that a more powerful rebuild had just begun, between a human and an alien girl, who had always been told she was unwanted, but Jace saw her, and Mira was beginning to believe it. Asterisk, they called her a joke, a burden, a shame, but the human stood before them all and said just one word. Mine. The council sent word the next morning. Mira and Jace were ordered to appear in the capital for a public peace celebration, a display of unity between humans and aliens. The entire city would be watching. Nobles, commanders, officials, reporters. It wasn't a request. It was a command. "It's a trap," Jace muttered as he read the message. "They want us to look weak. They want you humiliated, me defeated." Mira sat across from him at the breakfast table, her hands resting around a warm mug. "They always want that," she said calmly. "But we go anyway." Jace raised an eyebrow. "You want to go?" She gave a small nod. "If we hide, they win." Later that day, they stepped out of their transport and into the bright sun of the alien capital. The crowd gathered in the square was massive. Thousands of aliens lined the streets, dressed in their finest. Floating banners of peace waved in the air, but the looks on the people's faces said something. Else. Curious. Disgusted. Dodging. The first whisper came from the front row as Myra stepped down beside Jace. There she is. The soft daughter. He married that, even for peace? She looks like a walking disgrace. Myra's steps slowed, her back hunching slightly. Jace felt her hand tense around his. The marriage band on his wrist pulsed alive, glowing faintly. A reminder of their bond, and a choice. Right then, in front of everyone, Jace did something no one expected. He stopped. Turned. Took Myra's hand in both of his. And kissed her knuckles. The square went silent. A wave of shock swept through the crowd. Even the guards near the podium looked stunned. A public display of affection? With her? Jace turned and faced the crowd, his voice steady and loud. She is not a punishment, he said. Clearly. She is not a mistake. She is my wife. And if anyone has a problem with that, his voice sharpened, they can step forward now. No one moved. Myra stood frozen, her 4 eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. She had never been claimed in public before, never defended, never seen. Slowly, her shoulders lifted. She stood straighter, taller. One noble in gold armor sneered and stepped forward. This union insults the blood of warriors, he hissed. A human who speaks like this must be reminded of his place. Jace smirked. You want to remind me? With words or with fists? The noble growled, dropped his cape and charged. The crowd gasped. Jace didn't flinch. He moved fast, dodging to the side, grabbing the noble's wrist, flipping him over his shoulder in one clean motion. The noble crashed into the fountain behind him, soaking wet and furious. Jace stood over him. I'm done playing polite, he said. You want peace? Then treat my wife like a person. You want war again? He looked around at the watching council, the guards, the nobles. Then come and take your shot. Silence. Then something strange. Clapping. From the human delegation side. Then one alien in the back. Then another. Myra's heart pounded. She wasn't sure what was happening. All she knew was that the man beside her had just risked his standing, his safety, to say something simple. She matters. The event ended in confusion, with the council quickly ushering them back to their transport. But the damage was already done. A video of the scene had been recorded, shared, sent across systems. A human defending his alien wife in public, calling her his equal. By the time they returned to the peace quarters, the footage had gone viral. Half the galaxy was furious. The other half was curious. Inside their chamber, Myra looked at Jace. Why did you do that? He shrugged. Because I meant it. She stepped closer, hesitated, then gently touched the band on his wrist. I have never been chosen before, she whispered. Jace looked her in the eyes. You are now. And outside their doors, enemies watched the footage over and over again. Faces grim, plans already changing, because what had started as a joke was turning into something far more dangerous. Asterisk, they called their love dangerous. That night, someone tried to erase it with fire, blades, and blood. Night fell over the peace quarters, but sleep did not come easily. Myra sat by the window, watching the stars, her hand still touching the glowing band on her wrist. Jace lay on the nearby couch, pretending to read, but he wasn't. His eyes flicked toward the door every few seconds. Since their return from the capital, something had shifted, not just between them, but around them. Jace had seen the looks, the way the guards stiffened when he walked by, the way the servants whispered, then vanished. Their public display had drawn attention, too much of it. And attention, in a place like this, was always dangerous. Myra turned to him quietly. You feel it too, don't you? He didn't lie. Yeah, something's coming. They didn't know how right they were. Just past midnight, while the building slept, a dark shape moved through the vents. Then another, and another. Armed figures wearing black suits and breathing masks slipped through the estate like shadows. Silent, deadly, trained for one thing -elimination. At the same time, power cut off across the wing. The lights died. The cameras blinked out. Security systems turned to static. Jace was already up, gun in hand. He looked at Myra. Stay low. She shook her head. Not this time. The first attacker kicked in the door and was met with a blast from Jace's shock pistol. He went down hard, twitching, but more followed. 3 rushed the room, weapons drawn. Jace tackled one, slamming him into the table, but a blade slashed across his arm. Blood sprayed. Myra grabbed a metal rod from the fireplace and swung it hard, cracking another intruder across the back. She had never been trained to fight, but she had been trained to survive. Jace ducked behind a column as lasers cut through the air. "There's too many," he shouted. "They want to kill me," Myra said, breathless. "They think if I die, the treaty dies too. They'll leave you alive to blame you." "Not happening," he growled. He stood to fire again, then was knocked to the floor. An attacker slammed him down, pressing a blade against his throat. "Human filth," the masked voice hissed. "You think you can breed with our bloodline?" The blade pressed deeper. Then crack. The attacker flew across the room, slammed by Myra's full weight. She wasn't fast, she wasn't graceful, but she was strong and furious. She stood over the fallen man, chest heaving, eyes blazing. "You don't touch him," she snarled. More shadows flooded the hallway. "They're not stopping." Jace shouted. He pulled Myra behind the bedframe and tossed her a stun rod. "We hold the line. We protect each other." And they did. Side by side. Strike after strike, wound after wound. Until finally, the sound of sirens rose in the distance. Backup. The attackers vanished just as fast as they'd come, melting into the dark, leaving behind scorched walls, cracked furniture, and 2 bloodied survivors holding onto each other like lifelines. Security rushed in, shouting, scanning, too late to catch anyone. Jace dropped to his knees, exhausted. Myra crouched beside him, her hands pressed to his wound. "You're bleeding again," she whispered. "So are you." They both laughed, tired and shaky. "I thought I lost you," she said softly. He reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the alien High Council received a message from a cloaked sender. Operation failed. They survived. Inside, Myra and Jace sat on the floor of their ruined room. No longer strangers, no longer just symbols of peace. But partners. And the galaxy had just seen what happened when you tried to destroy a love that had finally found its strength. Asterisk. They forced a warrior to marry a shameful bride to humiliate him. Now the galaxy feared what they'd built together. The peace quarters were sealed. Guards patrolled every hall. Drones hovered overhead. After the assassination attempt, neither Jace nor Myra were allowed to leave. But something had shifted. Jace sat near the window, arm wrapped in bandages, watching the stars blink through the glass. Myra sat beside him, legs tucked under her, quietly weaving a band from scraps of torn curtain. She said it calmed her nerves. They didn't talk much now. They didn't need to. Their silences were no longer full of fear or shame. They were full of understanding. But outside, chaos grew louder. The video of the failed attack had leaked. Footage showed the human soldier protecting his alien wife, bleeding for her, standing at her side through fire and blades. Alien extremists called him a traitor. Human critics called him a fool. But common people on both sides called him something else. Real. Messages flooded in from across systems. Soldiers, farmers, refugees, all asking the same thing. Is this what peace looks like? It terrified the people in power. So the High Council summoned them both. Again. This time, not as guests. As problems. The court hall was larger than the last, lined with towering alien officials and cold human diplomats. At the center stood Mira and Jace, bound again by the same glowing band, this time by choice, not law. A stern counselor stepped forward. "You have caused waves," he said sharply. "Your actions have endangered the balance." Jace raised an eyebrow. "By not dying?" "By being seen," the counselor snapped. "By making others believe in you." An alien matriarch hissed. This marriage was symbolic. It was never meant to thrive. Mira stepped forward, and for the first time in her life, she did not look down. Her voice was clear. "That's the problem. You never expected me to matter." Gasps spread like sparks. She continued. "You gave me to a human because I was a stain on your pride. You thought he would hate me, beat me, leave me. And when he didn't, when he chose me," she pointed to her marriage band, "you became afraid." Another counselor growled. "You are emotional, unstable. Your opinion is—" "My opinion is not a threat," she said, sharper now. "But our love is, because it proves everything you built on hate can be undone with kindness." Silence fell. Then Jay stepped beside her. "I was your enemy," he said. "You expected me to be cruel, but you forgot one thing about humans. We don't always follow orders, we follow our hearts." He took Myra's hand in front of them all. "I didn't want this marriage," he said. "But I found something real in it. She's not a punishment. She's my partner. And I will fight anyone who tries to take her from me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then from the shadows the warlord, the father, emerged. Mira stiffened. He stood tall, older than before, quiet. And then he said something no one expected. "I was wrong." The room froze. He looked at Mira. "You are not a burden.